Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online video with me, Sherman. Today I want to discuss the game's design because I think that a lot of people see the game design but they only see the progressive stuff. They don't see how little progression our characters really get. I know it sounds funny, but we don't really grow that much in progression. So what I want to talk about first is I want to talk about the world's design because the world is a very flat scaled world. The open world, the only part, actually I should say, the open world itself is scaled really flat. Like all the mobs in it have the same represented power levels. The world bosses have the same represented power levels, all so on and so forth. Dungeons, normal dungeons, have almost the same power level as you do in open world. And they're just a little bit more powerful. And then the same thing goes for the, and that's because in dungeons, the mobs are made to be a little bit more difficult because it's supposed to be designed for 4 people. And Trials is the same thing. They're designed for 12 people. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because of the way the game's designed. We don't really grow in power, per se, as we do, like, right away. Like, you don't start growing up in growing in power until you really hit the CP. And then even then, you don't really grow in much power because it's such a small floor-to-ceiling growth in our characters that you don't really notice it, but you feel it. Like, you feel more powerful. You just don't really see it. And the reason why you don't see it is because of the way the game's designed. You got to remember, when your character starts out in the game now with Tamriel's launch, they put in a system where our character is scaled to the world. That means our character starts at a certain power level that's designed to fit within the world and normal dungeons and trials. Not any other way, but like that. And then as we progress through the game, we get more powerful because we learn new skills and stuff, and we gain new passives. So you got to look at the game from this perspective. First, you get 64 attribute points by the time you hit to 50. By the time you get to 50, you start unlocking CP. But you don't get a lot of CP. You get really small amounts of CP, like 10 points. But let's not talk about that yet. Let's go back to the inventory screen and look at the difference here. So as you progress in level and everything, like if I put on gear at low levels, it's going to be the equivalent of CP 160 because of the way they scale the gear and everything. So the only thing that separates my character from anyone else in the game is the fact that I don't have skills and passives unlocked by the time I reach 50 and I start earning CP. The gear I wear, like, it doesn't matter. I can wear any gear sets in the game at any level and it's comparable to the gear at max level because it's scaled to that level. So when somebody asked me about a week ago, like, what do you think is the right, what do you think I need to go in to start doing dungeons? I got to thinking, like, well, this was a while back, but not last week, it was a couple weeks ago. And I got to thinking, like, well, I don't really know because I've never tested that. And the reason I've never tested it is because I've never tested it. I never had a reason to. So I decided I'd give it a try and see what the minimum requirements are. And here's the minimum requirements. What is the lowest common denominator in the game? Anyone know? The race. Race is the lowest common denominator because there is only one race in the game that has no beneficial values to stats at all. And that's the Khajiit. The Khajiit is the lowest common denominator in the game. What's the second lowest common denominator? Green or white gear. That's the second. That's because we only have 5 tiers of gear. We have white, green, blue, purple, and gold. Now we have different materials of gear that we level through, but like I said, no matter what gear you're wearing, as long as you're within that level range, it's going to be comparable to CP 160 gear. So, not much of a difference. It's like, what's the difference between CP 150 and CP 160? Not much. But it's enough to make a difference. Or to make you feel it. So, CP 160 is really easy to get to in this game. So from CP 160, What do you get benefit-wise from there to max CP? Very, very, very small. You get 10% in all your stats. That's the growth of your character. But you got to think, at CP 6, say CP 300, you cannot, I mean this, you cannot grow your character's stats any higher unless you just change sets around. And that's it. That's all you get the capability to do, is change sets. As long as it's all gold quality and all your glyphs and everything is gold quality, you can't get any better in gear than that. You can't get more than 64 attribute points. You can't get any more bonus, like racial passives that give you increased health, stamina, and magicka, because there isn't anymore besides the undaunted metal, and that's only 6%. And you get 20% from champion points. So the growth in our characters is actually really small. Really small. In fact, it's so small, you could slide it right between here. You could take up the growth of our characters and fit it into that spot, because it's that small. It's literally, it's even, you could even put it in here. It's that small. Because when you start out, your character's already boosted. If we didn't get that boost, then it would be a different story. But we get that boost. So it really kind of offsets our characters in their growth, because we're boosted to level 36. And the only thing that separates us is the passives that we learn from skills. So let's take a look at some of these passives, shall we? Let's take a look at the racial passives. So let's say my max health, my max stamina is 28k. And you add 6%, you make 6% of 28k. Does anyone know what 6% of 28k is? It's going to be about roughly 1,400, 1,500 max, maybe 16, like 1,600. So I'm going to get 1,600 stats, like stamina. That's it. Yeah, man, I'm rocking. 1,600, man, that makes me super powerful. Now talk about a high elf. You're getting 12%. So you take 28k and you make 12%, and you're looking at 24,000 or 2,400 extra attributes. Now you're talking about some growth. But 1,300 is nothing. 14 or 1,800 is nothing. And then let's go even a step further. Let's say I have 30,000 and I have that much stamina. Like that, just I unlock my benefit, my racial benefits, and take it up to 6% from 30,000. And then what am I looking at? I'm looking at about 2,500. Okay, give me the 2,500. I'll take it, because it's going to put me at 32,500 stamina. It's a 2k increase. It's not a huge increase. Not as big as everyone makes it out. In fact, this is a greater increase almost. You see there where it says swords increase your damage by 5%? It's about like that. It's about a 5% increase in your damage. And even then, it's still pushing, you're still pushing it, because I don't know what the damage value, like percentage, it would give me. All I know is that the higher the stats, the more powerful I become. So we talk about, everyone talks about how all these passives make you super powerful. Yeah, they give you different percentage bonuses and everything, but the values that you have are flat. They're already flat. You can't get them any better than the gear that you're wearing and the passives that you unlock. So it's a very flat increase. Then you talk about racial benefits, and you talk about these different benefits that you get. Even the gear quality is really, really bad. I mean, come on. Look at this, for example. I'm wearing a purple Gladiator's Greatsword, okay? Look at the benefits on it. Now let's go down here and take a look at a green Greatsword. Not a very large increase, guys. Not a very large one at all. What, I go from a 7% crit to a 8% crit? Wow! That's huge. A 1% crit increase between green and purple. That's skipping a whole stage. It's not even that big of a deal. But people make it a big deal. People make these percentage values like this huge massive deal. And it's not. It's not that big of a deal when you look at the game from this perspective. But it is cool. I do love this game. Don't get me wrong. I'm not dissing the game. And I'm not dissing anything else. I just want people to understand the game's design and structure so that this way when they play the game, they have a greater understanding of it. And why there is a difference between an average player and a meta player, or a beginner player and a meta player. So you can see this is my build. I have minimaxed this build literally to its fullest potential. I can't even get it any better than it already is. The only thing I can do is upgrade my gear to gold. And even after I do that, it's going to be a super small increase. I already have all the passives I need unlocked. I already have all my CP unlocked. And I can't push my character any further beyond this point. Except for to get about 31,000 health and a 30,000 stamina. That's about it. And that is it. And I'm not kidding you guys. That is it. You can't push it any higher. The game will not allow it. And here's why. Because we only get incremental increases. We do not get massive increases. This game has such a horizontal progression. You can literally go from, say that this is the middle ground in the game. Okay? This is where you start in the game at power level. And as you progress, your character starts to lose some of that power and gain that power. So it just kind of tapers off just a little. And then once you hit 36, it starts to grow. And this is about how fast it's going to grow until I get to the other side of the screen. Now, I'm kind of shaky right now, and I do apologize, but until I get to the other side of the screen, this is about how its growth level is. It is that freaking slow and small. It feels like a big increase because you're going from values that are already comparable to a not so comparable, like to really comparable to not so comparable, because you have to account for all the different things in the game. You have to account for race, you have to account for gear and the set choices, and you have to account for the champion point placement. All that different stuff plays on your build. So my builds are going to be different from Alcast's. Alcast builds are going to be different from ESO Blobs. ESO Blobs builds are going to be different from Cypher's. Cypher's are going to be different from this person. This person is going to be different from this person, and this person, this person, this person. And that's because we're all different people. We perceive the game in different ways. But what we do have in common is we all minimax our builds to their fullest potential. That means you can't push them any more powerful than they already are, unless you adjust it to fit a different style of play. And that's it. That's all you can do. But the game has a really, because of this design structure, it means that there is a certain like minimum requirement in our builds that is needed. And then there is a like like a minimum value, maximum value kind of thing that they have set as like a baseline. So that means, like, if I was to use this screen as comparison again, this line is where they're shooting for our characters to be at all the time, pretty much. Like, they're trying to keep our power levels within this range most of the time, from beginning to end. And it might taper, excuse me, it might go up by a little bit, but they don't want it to get to the point where it's up here. They want it to stay somewhere around in here. Sorry guys, my chest cold is still bothering me. But that's my point, is that's what they're shooting for. They're shooting for our characters to stay within a certain power range. Now, when it comes to the meta exceeds the power limits of this game. Big time. Like, the builds in the meta exceed what the game's designed for. By such a huge margin, it's not even funny. And I'm gonna give you guys a description. I watched Alcast's guild run, Hodor run Ma about 6 months ago. Like when they first broke it, like broke the barrier and beat it. I watched that video where Alcast uploaded and he showed them running that trial. And they did that trial in like 48 minutes. Okay? Maybe it was a little bit longer, but I remember the video being about 40 minutes to an hour long. It's been a long time since I watched it. I watched his latest run through there with his guild, the same guild, and they did it in 27 minutes. That is almost a half an hour difference in speed. That is over a half an hour difference in speed. And you got to think, they cut their speed down to 30 minutes by 30 minutes because of the power that they... It wasn't because of the power that they gained, because they didn't gain much. You got to think, they didn't gain much. They actually gained power with Morrowind. They gained 10% of their attributes. So that was the biggest growth they got, was at 10%. They were already all capped when they started running that trial in CP. They couldn't get any more out of their characters than what they could at the time. It's because of the way they changed systems, and they put a cap on our attributes, like the total we can get from any kind of benefits. We're capped. We can't get any more. The only thing we're not capped on right now is how much CP we get. Eventually, they will have to cap the CP that we get. And then what does that leave us? It leaves us no character progression whatsoever beyond that point, unless they add a new tier gear. And if they add a new tier gear, it can't be any more powerful than what we already have. It has to be an incremental increase, just enough to put us a little bit above power than what we are. And then even then, they're pushing their own boundaries of their game, because that character with that gear and everything is going to be more powerful than any other player in the game. So let's say they add 180 gear or 170 gear, okay? CP 170 gear. Well, it's not going to change anything. It's not, because they would have to make it that small of an increase. If they made it too big of an increase, the rest of the content in the game would not work. And our characters would become too overpowered for the content, and the rest of the content would become obsolete. We'd be all focusing on only that end game. It's very much like World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft has a linear progression system, and because of that, 90% of the game's content is useless when you hit max level. It's just the leveling process that the content is useful. After that, everything is useless, and I mean everything. And why I say 10%, it's actually a lot more like 98% of the world is useless. Because the only thing you have access to is one zone, a couple dungeons, and a raid. And that's it. That's what you have access to. Because your character is so overpowered for everything else in the game that the rest of the game became obsolete. Now, one of the things that MMO developers have been trying to break out of for a long time, and it is a given, proven fact that this is true, because even the guys at Blizzard during a GDC said that they wish they could go back and change that one factor to where they could make the whole world enjoyable to the players, because they know there's players that like certain aspects of the game. They like certain dungeons, they like certain parts of the world, that kind of stuff, but they don't really care much for the rest of it. They only did it because they had to, because there was no other option. So the developers said it was that they felt it was too late to do that for their game, but it's still in something that they're looking into. Now, rumor has it they might be doing that to World of Warcraft, where it's going to have a scaled system. And if they did that, I can promise you this much. I know about 100 people who will go back to play that game just for that purpose, because they scaled it. I would be one of them. Because I would love to explore that game's, world without limitations. And that's what they did with Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 was the first to really initiate it, besides sandbox games. But Guild Wars 2 incorporated that sandbox element to where you could play all the way to max level and have the whole world be your playground. And it made the game really cool, because you could just go and do as you wanted whenever you wanted after you got to max level. There was so much stuff to do that once you explored every ounce of content in the game, They had already added new stuff for you to go do. And the game has been in a constant flux of development like that since they got their routine down. Now, around the same time that Guild Wars 2 was being released, Elder Scrolls was still being in the process of being finalized and developed. And it didn't come out for another year after, I think, Guild Wars 2 did. And they started with a linear progression game. They released it like all the other years. It was just a copy and paste World of Warcraft. And everyone that played the game really liked it. They were like, oh man, this is really cool. But they realized that the error of their ways. You can't make an Elder Scrolls title without it being an Elder Scrolls game. And it has to share those similarities. So they made adjustments with one Tamriel to make it similar to a Elder Scrolls game. And that's what they did. They made it similar to an Elder Scrolls game to bring in their fan base from Elder Scrolls into this game. Because they already know that Elder Scrolls 6 is still 2-3 years out. Possibly more, even more as 5. Because we don't have the technology that they want to use to create that game just yet. I mean, they could make another one, but it would be no different than playing Skyrim. It would just be in another region of the world. But they want a game that's going to blow people's minds. And if they make it just like all the other Elder Scrolls games, yeah, that'd be cool, but they want it to have different elements to it. So they want to make sure that they have that ready, and they have the tools to do that. So why not make an online version? Make it very similar to the actual game. And that's kind of what they're doing here. Now, if you guys didn't notice, once One Tamriel came out, it's taken them a long time to gather a lot of data to see how they can balance our characters within the game's world and its design. What did they do with Morrowind, which was almost a year or 2 years after that? They adjusted everything in the CP so that our characters wouldn't become overpowered for the game's content. Then what they do with Horns of the Reach, this DLC that just came out, they did adjustments to Mundus Stones and the trades and the gear sets so we wouldn't become overpowered for the content. They put us at the power level they wanted us to, and they're holding us there. Now, if you guys think that, oh, well, the next DLC is going to come out with new stuff, it's going to be more challenging, it's not going to get any more challenging than it already is. And that's because we're right there on the verge of needing a new difficulty. We're just on the hairline of it. Like, literally, you could... The next DLC is going to push us to being right where we're needed to be for a new difficulty. And and that's just hypothetically speaking, but from what I can tell from design, they're going to have to add a new difficulty past that point. And that new difficulty is going to have to be harder dungeons and trials. They can't make the world itself any more difficult because they can't. It's already set in stone. They can only make a harder difficulty dungeon and trial. Now remember what I said earlier about Outcast and them completing that trial in 27 minutes. That's how you know that the content is becoming too easy. Is they cleared it in record time. I haven't even seen another guild or group of people do that trial in 27 minutes if the video wasn't sped up. And Outcast didn't speed up the video. That's how long it took them from beginning to end to complete it. Which, hats off to your team, Outcast, because that's pretty impressive. Now, with this kind of design in the game, like I said, there is a baseline that they have in mind for our builds to be about, to play all content in the game. Like, they have a requirement, and it is. They expect us to have a certain amount of health. They expect us to have a certain amount of attribute points, a certain amount of recovery, a certain amount of damage, a certain amount of crit, and a certain amount of resistances, no matter what we're playing. Because this is a combat game, guys. This has action combat. That means everyone in your group has to contribute. Unless you have a build like, set up like Outcast's, where the tanks don't have to do damage, and the healers don't have to do damage. But for the average player, because of design, they have it set to require average players to play into a certain degree of structure. And that structure is something I will explain in another video, because I'm going to go over all that in that video. So unfortunately, I'm not going to explain it now. But here's the thing you need to know about playing the game. When you play when you first enter the game, you're a noob. Okay, you might understand the controls to a certain degree because you played online. You played Elder Scrolls with a controller or whatever. You have some basic understanding for it. But you don't understand the mechanics of all the content, like dungeons and trials, or even PvP. So you take that into consideration, okay? Now you learn that content, and you become a better player. But you still don't have that skill level of those elite players. And the reason you will never have that skill level of those elite players is because they have mastered every ounce of content in this game by repeating that content hundreds of thousands of times, to where they can literally like sleep through that. And they have their characters set up to that power level because they have gotten that good at the game. A new player is not that good at the game, and doing those kind of rotations that they expect you to do isn't as easy as it looks. Especially if you have hand-eye coordination issues, you have other things that can keep you from doing that kind of stuff, like myself. Like, I have tremors. I can't do those kind of coordination. I can't do those rotations. It's too much it's too much for me. That's why most of my builds don't fit the meta. That's because they're designed for me, for my playstyle. And the reason I don't do a lot of DPS builds most of the time is because I don't play a lot of DPS builds. I just can't do that kind of damage. I can play a tank really well, and I can play a healer really well, but that's about it. And yes, I could play the meta tank if I wanted to. I just don't really care for it. No offense. Don't take it wrong, guys. It's just I don't care for the meta tanks at all. I like some of the stuff, like I like Warhorn. That's a pretty cool ability. I like Vigor. But I don't see a requirement for it for dungeons. Like, I don't see a reason to have it for running dungeons. I see a reason to have it for running trials, and that's to boost 12 people's attributes and everything. I can see that, but 4 people doesn't really need it. That's just overkill for most dungeons anyways. Now, I could see maybe using it against Mighty Chudin just to kick the snot out of that little bugger. Sorry, I have a deep hatred for Chudin. Everything else in that dungeon I love. Chudin I hate. Okay, and I truly do say that. I hate Chudin. It's like that's like my arch nemesis in the game. But the whole point of this conversation is just to explain to you guys how the game works, so you have a greater understanding of that floor and ceiling and how close it really is. Now, I do want to go over a few things real quick, and that is comparative gear. So you guys get an idea of like what comparative gear means and why different builds, and it's true, different builds with different sets are going to give you different results. And this is why there is nothing on for the meta right now, is because you got to look at all these different comparisons. So let's go ahead and take a look at those comparisons out here at the wiki, and thanks to the guys over the wiki, they have fixed all the stats on the stuff except for one monster set, and we won't even be looking at that. So looking at some of these sets, you guys know what the dungeon or trial, like the meta is right now for stamina? Anyone? It's 5 pieces of Hunting's Rage with 5 pieces of Two-Fanged Serpent. So we're going to take a look at this right here, and we're going to go find sets that compare to Hunting's Rage. Well, I can already see one right here, and that's Night Mothers. And that's because Night Mothers gives you both 2 things of critical, 1 thing of weapon damage, and then the 5th piece bonus is to compensate for how this thing gives you 1,000 stamina and all this weapon damage. That's how this set works. This is a comparative set. This is a comparative set. I know it doesn't seem like it, but it is a comparative set. Another comparative set to those is Berserker Warrior. This is another comparative set. And then if you go on down, I don't think there's another one in here that's even considered comparative, because that's the only set I know of in heavy armor that gives you that same type of setup. And there's only one set I know of, like I said, that I know of in heavy armor. like that. Okay, so we don't have any more comparatives here. Now let's go take a look at medium armor, and I'll tell you this much: there is no comparative in light armor, except for Juliana's. So we're going to go take a look at medium. Here's one right here, right at the top of the screen, in fact. Archer's Mind is a comparative, because it gives you max stamina, gives you 2 things a crit, and then it gives you this bonus, which increases your critical damage done by 5%, and increases your critical damage done by an additional 10% when attacking out of stealth, or sneak. So that's a really kind of comparative set there. Going on down, this is a comparative set, Leviathan is. I know it doesn't seem like it, but it is. It compensates with extra crit to compensate for the weapon damage. Moving on, this is a... no, not that one. Not that one. Where are you hiding? Stormmasters is another comparative set. And, of course, there is... Vicious Ophidian is or Vicious Serpent is another comparative set. And it's comparative, even though it doesn't give the same kind of bonuses, it is a comparative set because the 3-piece bonus gives you a 5% damage to dungeon and trial monsters. And then this down here reduces the cost of stamina abilities, and when you kill them, you restore 2,000 something, and then it gives you a little bit of extra weapon damage. That's why it's considered a comparative set. Viper's Sting is a comparative set. And that, I believe, is it for those comparative sets. But there's a lot of other comparative sets in the game. Sword Singer and Sword Dancers, both comparative. One requires dual wield, one requires two-handed. Another comparative set to both of these, right here, is any set that mimics it. Swamp Raider is a comparative set. Even though it's not identical, it is a comparative set. It's because of how it's laid out. This is a comparative set. Actually, even Spriggans is a comparative set to those. And this is a comparative set. Comparative set. So you can see how the sets are have equal counterparts. And they're not equal. They just have counterparts that are similar to them. This is a really similar set to Spriggans. Even though it doesn't give you the penetration, it gives you this extra poison damage for that to compensate. And it doesn't compensate to a 100% equalness. It compensates to give you something similar. And that's why it's comparative. And there's a lot of sets in the game like this that are very comparative in every category. So when you go to play the game and you look at the different sets and you're looking for a build, remember this. Any gear set in the game with any combination of other gear set will work within the game's design. It's just you have to come up how to make that work within the game's design. Like, oh, I want to use Sword Dancers, but I want to use Hiracine as well. Okay, well now you got to make them work together. And you have to minimax that build to work to its fullest potential. And if you can do that, you have that build at its maximum power rating. It can't get any higher. That means it will work within all content of the game. Dungeons, trials, PvP, PvE, it doesn't matter. And that's because you designed it to work that way. And that means every little piece of gear in this game can be comboed with another set to make a build. Now, when you guys say this game doesn't have a diverse build system, please explain to me where it doesn't. Oh, but they're not going to be the meta. Who cares about the meta? When I have that many variety of builds, I'd much rather play that variety of builds than just one. Why would I want to play a variety of different builds? Because the game allows me to. It lets me play that way. And I would enjoy to play the game more that way than to follow somebody else's design to a letter, than allowing myself to play the game in the enjoyment that I feel comfortable. So here's one of the things that a lot of people don't take into consideration. What is the lowest common denominator of the game? Khajiit, white armor. Boom, done. What is the highest common denominator in the game? A max level character with max CP and all the benefits the game has to offer for that build. That means gold quality gear, gold glyphs, gold traits, or gold everything, and the maximum amount of attribute benefits. That's it. That's the highest common denominator. And the lowest is a Khajiit in white gear. Why is that the lowest? Because a Khajiit doesn't get any racial benefits whatsoever. So you got to remember, this game has a flat build design. Like, the open world has a certain power level, which our characters new into the game in white gear can play in. And we can play all the way to max level in white gear and be fine. It'll be a little difficult, but it is possible. And you don't even need to use sets. You can just use white gear with white freaking enchants and play through the whole entire game. All the way up, well, all the main story and like the side quests and everything, but you can't like go solo world bosses like that unless you're a really damn good player and can really pull off a lot of dodge rolling and stuff. But you can play the rest of the content because the game's designed to allow you. It's just going to be at the greatest difficulty the game has to offer. And that's because gear is a large factor in our characters' stuff. And it goes on. There's a lot more to it than that, guys. But unfortunately, it would take a lot of videos to go over every aspect of the game, like why gear is the way it is. But I'll just put it in the simplest form. There's only 5 tiers of gear. White, green, blue, purple, and gold. And it doesn't matter what level you are, that's the 5 tiers of gear. Glyphs are the same thing. They have the same 5 tiers in quality. Weapons have the same 5 tiers in quality. So, wherever you are playing in the game, you can literally grab any 2 gear sets and make a build out of those 2 gear sets that fits your playstyle and will work in any aspect of the game you want it to. As long as you make it to a build that is viable and works for you. So, here's the thing, guys. I'm going to be releasing a lot of builds here soon that are going to be a variety of designs, not just one specific type of build over and over again. This is the only character I'm going to be showing you guys that's got this specific over and over and over again build. And that's because I don't want to change her ever again. Like, I'm not going to change her ever again. She's done being changed. And that's because I don't like playing her any other way. I can't. I've tried. And I just can't do it. I can't bring myself to do it. It's like putting a cat to sleep, okay, when there's nothing wrong. I just can't do it. I'd much rather take it into my home and give it a good home than take it down to the pound and watch it get put to sleep. So, yeah, I just can't do it. But that's it. I mean, this game is really cool when you look at it. It has a really robust system because it does offer that much variety in build design. It also offers a lot of different play styles. And then the difficulty of the game is set to an average play style because of this factor, but also because of the factor you have to look at the community. When you have a community of 8 million different players, not all of them play at the skill level Outcast does. So you have to design the game to have a certain requirement, like, not certain requirements, but a certain power level that the players have to beat. And that power level isn't going to be impossible. And they're not going to let it be too impossible because they want every player in the game to have access to it and be able to play it. And not just at, oh, well, you can go play it on normal difficulty, guys. No, they want them doing it vet difficulty. They want them doing it hard mode. Why? Because that's where the best rewards are. And they're going to make the difficulty to fit in that section, into that category. That's why Outcast and them can beat it in 27 minutes. They are so overpowered for that content, it's not even funny. I mean, come on, it took them like 9 minutes to kill the final, not even 9 minutes to kill the final boss. Like 36 million health. It was like watching a pack of piranhas eat a cow. It was disgusting. But it was cool as hell. I give them props for that. I don't agree with their playstyle, but I give them props. But that's Outcast. Outcast is different from me. We don't share the same issues, the same things. So, but I respect him for his work, and I think it's cool that we have somebody in the community that focuses on that kind of playstyle for those kind of players. I think it's cool that Gilliam focuses so much on the math in the game that he explains it in detail, even though it can put you to sleep sometimes, which it has, by the way, Gilliam. And that's why I respect even ESO Daily, even though he's a shit talker, and he knows he is, he admits it. I respect him because he's somebody in the community who's willing to talk about different aspects of the game and give his own perspective. And just like everyone else out there that does videos, I respect everyone out there. Eloa, you know, she's an amazing content. She's an amazing content provider. She does a really good job. Even though her native language isn't English, she is fantastic at explaining what her build does, her builds and her thoughts and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, and any other people out there that do YouTube, you know, videos and stuff, I respect them. Just like I respect everyone on the forums, like D Pencil 1. Dudes have, like, put it together, like, this really cool thing where he compared all the different gear. Before we got the nerf to crit, but he did that. The same thing with, you know, Joy Division. Every update, Joy's on the forums fighting for us Templars. Go, Joy, you know, keep fighting the good fight. Except we're not going to get any more powerful. I'm sorry. They can't do that. They can't make us any more powerful than we already are. We can keep trying, though. And then there's not only them, but there's Arios. And there's a lot of people out there that do work hard on a lot of stuff to bring you guys all this information. And if you don't show respect where respect is deserved, you're no better than anybody else. And I do. I show them respect because they deserve it. Now, I don't agree with a lot of their stuff. I'm not going to lie. I don't agree with tank meta at all. I think that's like it's like you taking a clown and throwing him into a dogfight, you know? To me, it just doesn't work. You don't take a clown and throw it into a pack of dogs, you know? It's like, are you kidding me? And that's the way I see it, because I don't get the idea of having a tank who doesn't fight back, who doesn't help the group besides debuffing and standing there and buffing the group. I mean, you can still do that and do damage at the same time. Anyone who said that you can't, I mean, I literally watched Outcast tank fight, you know, tank Rakat in that trial, and literally, like, throughout the fight, he had more opportunity to do damage than just stand there and hold block. Because all he had to block was like 3 things out of the whole fight. I mean, Outcast even blocked those 3 things. The rest of the time, Outcast is sitting there beating on this guy and taking all these hits. And if Outcast can do that with literally 12k resistances and 20k health on a Khajiit, this guy could do it in whatever he had in resistances, and a 40k health, he could be dishing some damage to that boss. No offense, Outcast, but that's my only gripe with the meta. Like, if you want to get the most damage potential out of your group, everyone does damage. Not just the DPS. Could you imagine that, though? If like their DPS, like they beat it in 28 minutes. I mean, 27 minutes, the whole trial. Could you imagine if their tanks and their healers both did a certain amount of damage? Let's say 15k on the tanks, 15k on the healer, like DPS wise. Could you imagine that? Like that together is 60k DPS added to theirs. That 60k DPS per second. That they would be clearing that trial in like probably 20 minutes, or maybe even 18 minutes. I mean, I don't know the math. I mean, I'd have to calculate all the health pools of everything in the game and then go from there. But yeah, I mean, even tanking, I've tanked so many dungeons and trials, like throughout my histories in gaming, and that it's like, I watch these people, I'm like, I just can't do that. Like, I cannot play that way at all. And like I said, it's not that I disrespect it. I'm disrespecting it. It's just I can't play that way. I can't play the wet noodle tank, and that's what I call it, wet noodle tanking. It's because you hit so hard. Your character only hits as hard as a wet noodle. They're beefier than hell. They're tanky as snot, but they just, it's, you just don't, I don't even know how they can fight their way out of a paper bag. I don't even know how they can do quests in those things. I couldn't do a quest in that build. I'd cut my I would throw all my gear away. I wouldn't care if it was gold. I do like Alkosh though. That's a cool gear. I wouldn't mind having it on this character. If I did, I'd probably go with a different setup than what I have now, for sure. I'd probably go with a different race, probably Argonian. But that's because then I'd get the health bonus, and I wouldn't have to really worry. Like, I would have a greater ease of making my health pool higher, and then I could run Alkosh, be this DPS tank, you know, with Alkosh, and then that armor break and everything else I'm getting benefited for, and I'm like, yeah, give me Conan. But that's it, you know. See, I will admit what I don't agree with in the meta. And I'll diss it, like, jokingly, but I'm not going to, like, oh, man, you guys, that thing's a piece of shit. Because it's not. It works. And it works really well. It just doesn't work the way I want it to. If it worked the way I wanted to, I would love to see what Alcast could do with the DPS tank. Honestly, I would love to see what he could do with the DPS tank. I'd love to see him push it to its full potential. Because that thing would be a freaking beast. That thing would be a monster. Or if Gilliam did it, holy shit, man. I wouldn't want to go near that tank. Not even in PvE. I'd be scared. I'd be hiding underneath the bridge when it walked by. Because that thing would be scarier than hell. Because you know that they would maximize that thing's damage potential. Like, they would maximize its tankiness, but then they would maximize its damage potential some ungodly number. And that's because that's what they do. That's what I do too. I just don't do it with their builds. I do it with the builds that I think would work within the game's design. And I do it with every single build I make. I make it to work within all content. Now, here recently, I released some builds saying that they were a small group. Because I didn't want to say they were trial ready. Because nobody would really play those kind of a build in a trial. But small group play, yeah, people would play it. But they will work in trials. Trust me, they will. They are already above power for them. But unfortunately, the video is getting too long, guys. I need to cut it short, so I'm going to leave you with this. I have a lot more videos to come. I'm not kidding you. Because I got a lot to talk about. Now that I've grown to understand more about the game, I have a lot more to talk about. A whole lot more. And I have a ton of builds to coming out to you guys. My first build should be coming out next week. Maybe tomorrow if I can get certain things done with it, but I want to finish capping my CP before I release it because it kind of needs that little bit of oomph. And I do have to do some tweaking to it because of Precise and the Thief Stone thing. Really kind of threw this other one off by a chunk. So I kind of got to go back and redo that one, and that pisses me off. Thanks, devs. No, actually it doesn't bother me. All I have to do is I have to grab 2 pieces of divines and throw it on the character so I can compensate for the crit loss that it got. Other than that, I'll be fine. It'll be just fine. So, but yeah, that's it. So if you guys like this video, which I hope you did, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, hit that subscribe button. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy will see you all later. Bye.